Welcome to the African Diaspora Garden Celebration. Let's have a big hand for that. I don't hear you. Let's have some shouting, some hooting and hollering. Yeah. Hey, my name's Damon Wade. I'm director of the North Carolina Botanical Garden, and the absolute best part of my job is acknowledging and recognizing people who do really cool and great stuff. And so that's why I'm up here. And I want to start out with the co-creators of the Diaspora Garden, and that would be Alejandro Ibrahim and Josie Walker. And I want to acknowledge Josie Walker's family who is here today. So thank you for joining us. Let's give them a big hand for that. And so turning that idea into a reality required some help from our horticulture staff. And I want to acknowledge our horticulture staff here at the garden. We have Dan Stern, Director of Horticulture. Rich, who's the curator of the garden. Chiquita Holloway, where are you? Stand up, Chiquita. Okay, but there's, I'm going to come back to Ainsley because Ainsley has shown this garden a lot of leadership, especially as chair of our Access, Belonging, and Community Committee, and then, also with this garden project. And so I want to thank you for that leadership and turn it over to you at the same time. So here you go.
First, I want to recognize and acknowledge my supervisor, Dan Stern, who, along with Alejandro and Josie, brought me this project in the fall of last year. And so it was a very exciting opportunity for me. And also, we want to acknowledge and recognize the folks that came here before us, people that were here before us that initially were born here, and the folks that were brought here that have cared for and stewarded this land long before we got here.
Come up and say some words about Josie's contributions to the garden.
Oh, thank you. So, hey everyone, I'm Derek. It's nice to meet you. Nice to see some of the family who I've seen before. I'm going to talk about Josie. Before I do, I want you all to do me a solid, right? I'm stretching here because we're waiting on some other people to come up. Okay? To be honest with you. So we have a lot of people in here, right? So let's make sure we're sitting up on top of each other like family today. I know we survived a global pandemic, right? So we did that. But let's make sure we're being all close. Share this on your social media so we can make sure we magnify this event. I met Josie Walker several years ago through social media. I was doing my regular thing, talking about my hometown of New Bern, North Carolina. And she happened to comment, hey, I'm familiar, I'm from Trenton. Most people don't know about New Bern. Less people know about Trenton, right? How many of you heard about Craven County, Trenton? New Bern, North Carolina, Trenton? Okay, a couple of hands, but not a lot, right? Most people don't know. It's the world's best secret. And from there, when we connected, she became an exemplar of what it means to be giving young. From cabbage collard seeds, I mentioned I wanted to grow them one time. She gave me all sorts of seeds. Plants, she would come and visit me when I was in town. I went to the house. Mama gave me cabbages and everything, so it must run in the family. I had all types of food in my car. They gave me so much food. I was giving it away on the streets. I never told them. I was giving it away on the street. There was so much stuff given to me. Plants and everything else. But Josie was what it meant to represent grassroots efforts. So when we are here today and you all are telling people about the African Diaspora Garden, and I know there's a panel and we're going to be talking to the people and doing all the other things. Give me 1 second. We're going to keep stretching here. When it comes to African Diaspora Garden and what we're doing today, I want you all to consider this: grassroots efforts. That was what Josie was about. Grassroots efforts and historicity. Black people, African descended people in America had to use what they had to get what they needed. And when it comes to this diaspora garden, it will literally be able to represent what we as Black folks have been doing since antiquity, right? Just like Josie would give away so many seeds, so many plants, so much knowledge, so much history, this garden is a representation of that. So I challenge all of you, I charge all of you to be able to do the same, to be able to go amongst your lives and give a seed to someone. Now, that seed can be a plant, that's a literal exhortation, right? But that seed can be anything, a hopeful idea, a listening ear, right? $1 or two, so somebody can buy a burger. They're more than that now, but $1 or two, you give them something. So in that way, that person will be able. That was real good for dramatic effect. We played. That was dramatic effect. We loved it. I paid her $20 to do that. That was really good. Somebody please help her. There we go. Don't lean up against the wall. Like the seed of joy I gave her for pushing that button, right? Give seeds and be able to bless and help others. So, who's next? That's great. So I'm going to keep talking because Alejandro made a quick run. There he is. Are they here? Beautiful. It's your turn now. Yeah, I know you got. It's your turn now. So I'm going to hand this over to Alejandro. Alejandro is a phenomenal gentleman I met through Josie, who is again one of the progenitors of this project. When we see people who are doing great things, we have to give them a great response. Okay. So all of you are going to do just that. You're going to get your hands and your vocal cords ready. Go ahead and clear your throats. Me. And we're going to go ahead and give them a round of applause.
Uh, thank you guys very much for coming. We have a beautiful turnout. I remember we were talking about in the meeting and they said only 6 people registered. I said, oh boy. But now it looks like a lot of people really came, so thank you. So this idea came again from around, I was in the room thinking, and I was like, I saw what had been done in New York. They had a botanical garden that captured the African-American, the African experience with vegetables and farming. And I said, we should do one here. So I talked to Ms. Josie, and she said, that's a great idea. And after that, she got me in touch with the staff here, and we started planning on it. So again, Ms. Josie is just, she's the person who really got me into this type of work. Met her on Instagram, and we started talking. And then my dad said, oh, yeah, I know Josie. Cause my dad taught A&T, so he said, yeah, she was like one of my students. I said, oh, wow. So, everybody knew her, and she just loved so much. So, just happy that we're able to do this, because I know if she was here, she would be really happy today to see the great work that we have done. So with that being said, I'm going to open it and start our panel, and then we're going to go see the lovely garden out there, have some refreshments, drinks, and we're going to do some seed swapping, and then some of you might be, feel the urge to pluck a little plant. We're not going to look if you want to do that. If you don't want to take it, we're not going to look. Anyways, so right now I would like to introduce our panelists. So first up is Dr. Cynthia Greenlee. Let's give her a round of applause. So, Dr. Cynthia Greenlee is a North Carolina native, a historian, and recognized as one of the nation's most innovative food writers. She is a 2-time graduate of UNC Chapel Hill, Go Heels. I'm actually getting my PhD here now, so yeah, but I went to education for my master's, so okay. Where she was a Morehead scholar and earned a master's in journalism. She crossed over to the dark blue side, only for study, never for sport. She spent with that one. And completed a PhD in the legal history of African Americans at Duke. She has won a James Beard Award, considered the Pulitzer Prize in American Free Writing. Her freelance work has appeared in Times, The Nation, Garden and Gun, and Smithsonian Magazine, among dozens of other publications. Her writings have also, let's give her a round of applause. She said James Beard. Okay. Writing has also selected for the Best American Food Writing twice and Best American Science and Nature Writing. She is currently the deputy editor of special projects at The Guardian, where she oversees a series called Our Unequal Earth about food, agriculture, and sustainability. She is an enthusiastic but novice gardener who likes to just throw out seeds and see what happens. And Dr. Greenlee is at work on a book she calls Alternative History of Black Food in the United States. So, And next up, we're going to do Miss. Give me 1 second, everyone. Miss Erin Logan. So Erin Logan is right there. Let's give her a round of applause. So Erin Logan is from Jackson, Mississippi, and is a second-year PhD student at NC State. Go Pack, yeah! She works under Dr. Jillian de Gazelle in the NC State Ethnobotany Lab, where she is learning the relationship between humans, plants, and the environment. Through this lab, she connects the traditional knowledge of indigenous communities with local outreach initiatives, such as the Kohari Tribal Seed Swap. Erin has also worked under Dr. Carla Clinton in the ASHES Laboratory, a genetic lab that works with living standards of hard-scale plantation and other communities. The lab uses ancient DNA found in soil to help shed light on ancestry, genetic diversity, and unheard stories in the research pioneer area. Erin's research focuses on Black ethnobotany during the antebellum period and its influence on Black American culture. She uses genetics, plant chemistry, and interviews. Historical archives display the plant-based practices that have contributed to food, herbal medicine, and other cultural knowledge. Her project mainly takes place in North Carolina and Mississippi. She is also working with ancient plant DNA found within the soil of the New York African burial ground. Outside of research, Erin Logan is an advocate of creative expression. She's an Instagram creator. Follow her Instagram at Let the Erin, where she posts her creative projects and relatable content to inspire others to try something new. Let's give another round of applause. Last but not least, y'all know, Mr. Derek Haynes. So, following the footsteps of iconic Black plant scientists George Washington Carver and Percy Julian is no small feat, but Derek Haynes, known as a chocolate botanist, is uniquely positioned to lead the charge. Originally recognized as the crazy botanist, Derek rebranded to honor his chocolate complexion and celebrate his Black identity, infusing his work with a powerful narrative of cultural pride and scientific rigor. As a scientist and communicator, he seamlessly weaves together botany, ethnobotany, and humor, creating a relatable bridge between traditional botanical wisdom and modern science. Derek's commitment to evidence-based science is evident through his active efforts in debunking the misleading plant hacks on social media. This is why I'm posting on social media with plants. I don't want them coming through on me or nothing. Social media, ensuring that his audience can discern from fact from fiction. His engaging presence has seen him take on multiple roles: speaker, panelist, moderator, master of ceremony, lecturer, and host at even events like the Northwest Flower and Garden Festival, the African American Legacy of Gardening and Horticulture, and the Southeast Plant Show. Additionally, his board memberships with GuardCom and North Carolina Botanical Gardens, alongside speaking engagements at venues such as Sarah P. Duke's Garden, underlies his influence and leadership within the botanical community. Featured on platforms like Growing Joy with Maria, Damn Internet Use Crazy, sorry for my language, scary, the Lika Queen, and as well as collaborating with Bill Nye, Derek has built a community of over 70,000 plant lovers that value both scientific authenticity and cultural storytelling. Whether connecting with his audience online or in person, the chocolate botanist remains dedicated to uplifting science, celebrating Black heritage, and inspiring a new generation of botanical enthusiasm. So, with that being said, that is our panelist for today. Our panelists today, we're just gonna really go over about a couple questions. Then we're gonna open up to the audience if you guys would like to ask us any questions. So my first question is really simple. What is your plant story? What got you involved? What got you into this?
Jumping in, I know we were going to start over there. I see there are 4 people in the back, and there's a couple of seats that are open here. If you have an open seat near you, and you might have your bag in it, please raise your hand so that people in the back can take seats. Let's be community builders together. Plant some community together. Thank you. Go ahead, Erin.
I can go first. So honestly, I said I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, right? But I was originally from Louisiana. And when I was younger, I was about 5 years old, and I would walk outside, and the first plant, and really the only plant that I really recognized was this thing called a spider lily. You know, those big, beautiful lily. And, you know, I didn't know what a plant really was at the time. I was just like, right? And then over time, I learned more about plants. And then they're popping up in my life that kind of propelled me to it. Fifth grade, I learned that agriculture. And then in 10th grade, I opened a random biology book, and it's like, botany is the study of plants. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's an actual thing, right? And then I go into undergrad, and then I'm studying, I'm taking so many plant classes, I talk to this person, this plant biologist, and I tell him that I want to learn more about plants, but if I hear stories about how different cultures I can relate to it about I told him that I found one ethnobotany lab here in NC State with Dr. Gazelle, and it changed my life when I talked to her because I realized that I was able to do the work that I've always wanted to do. And so now I'm here working with her and also finding someone who works with African American communities here in Raleigh. And I'm able to do that work, and I'm able to learn more, and I'm able to research more. And I'm just really happy to be able to do the things that I've dreamed of doing all my life. So that's my story.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. I wouldn't say I was a plant person until about 2 years ago, even though my maternal grandparents were farmers all their lives. My mom moved away from the farm when she was 17. She was running away from the farm and went to school. Never looked back. My grandfather got fired. Not for this life. And that was life. But my dad was an extrovert. I don't want to do anything. I want the end product. So fast forward years later, I like it. I do it. Because my yard is wild, and it's supposed to look wild. It's supposed to look that way. It's not supposed to look that way. It's that way. All these they talk to me about things that I felt guilty. I don't have anything else to say about what the potato lunch. They're the same as they were 3 days ago. And she got me to the point that you don't make me feel dumb, even though I was dealing with things that hard. And I was like, and okay, said, what variety are you growing? What's your soil like? Have you been tested? Did flowers? She was like, rain situation, what's growing around it? And I have to say that those are call her and just benefit from her brain. The reading was her. Our readings have gotten a little out of hand. About it. About it. So, the songs and motions, like that. Feel like so I'm going to in my mouth, but sometimes you can talk to me about food. Trail.
Follow that, but I'll give it a go. So I come from New Bern, that's my hometown, but I am originally grew up in a smaller town, hard to believe smaller than New Bern, called Vanceboro. So on the outskirts of Vanceboro, I grew up running up and down the hills and playing with so many plants and just falling in love with grasses. And then we moved in the mid-90s to New Bern proper. I just touched every plant, honeysuckle, everything. I was a science geek. I was a reader avidly. I would quote things I would see in these science books to people, much to most people's dismay. I've been a talker all my life. I think my first word was like a sentence. And I thought that was funny, the first word was a sentence. But I just had a passion for plants forever. So in high school, when we did what would you be when you grow up PowerPoint, I looked into so many things, engineering, chemistry, biology, but botany was like the thing. It was like, this is it. I have to do this. And since that day, I have been on it, being a plant biologist, being a plant nerd, especially once the pandemic happened. And I now wasn't the weird person posting about plants anymore. And I could find others who were doing the same in the community. I just started really pushing that as much as I could.
I'll give my little quick story. So my parents are not from here. So my dad's from Nigeria, my mom's from Panama. So my dad brought a lot of his culture over, so he bought a farm, and everything. So he had us out there picking cucumbers and things like that, but also plants from Africa, like, Scotch bonnet peppers, garden eggs, sorrel especially. So that's how I really got interested in my plant story. And at first, I didn't really like plants. I like the animals more. And I was like, Dad, can we get more animals? But he was always like focused on growing all these peppers and peppers. I was like, I don't care about that. But as time went on, I actually got more interested in plants because I found out that they're a lot quieter sometimes, a lot easier to take care of. So I got more into plants. I still love animals though. I got a heap of chickens in my backyard, in my house. But yeah, so that's how I really got into plants, and I've loved it ever since. And it's also like just a form of cultural expression for me, and something that I can do in my spare time. So my next question is, why is the African Diaspora Garden so important in this time? Why is what we're doing here in the Botanical Garden so important? What does it mean?
I feel like in this time and age, especially in the Black community, from my experience, people feel a little less safe when it comes to things dealing with healthcare, when it comes to food systems that are supposed to take care of us. We don't feel that security. So there's a lot more people who are trying to look into ways to articulate. And with the rise of social media, like Black Forager, the chocolate botanists, like people who are able to spread this information and give knowledge to people about their own culture, things like this, a physical representation of what your culture is such a, that should be. And so to be able to have that is just a great way to show that it existed, especially for people like me who didn't even know it existed when I was young. So for having younger generations to come and see this thing, be able to grow up with it is such an amazing thing to have in our culture. and to be able to grow up with it, to be able to nurture it into something new.
So I'm a historian, and so part of what I'm going to do, because I'm used to teaching people, is I'm going to give you a reading suggestion. Going to give you homework, if you're inclined. You need to read the book In the Shadow of Slavery by Judith Carney, which is about 20 years old, but it is the book about the African contribution to what is U.S. agriculture and really the agriculture of the world. So I was like thinking about what I could say about this question today, and I made a little list of all of the things, well, not all of the things, a short list of many of the things, vegetables, fruits, crops that are of definitive African origin. Okay, I'm only reading about 20 of these, but you will get the point. So the bao. If you go to Charleston, there is a place that has beautiful bao ice cream. Talk to me later about it. Watermelon, muskmelon. Josie and I once had a talk of an hour about why muskmelons have disappeared in many places. I have one in my backyard now. Guinea peppers, various peppers, the shea nut tree, as of shea butter, right? Hibiscus, also called roselle. It's the basis of bissap, that red drink, the original red drink from Senegal and West Africa. Ground nuts, African spinach or amaranth, a lot of gourds, like the bottleneck gourds, the cola nut, cola with a K, which became one of the first ingredients and why the original Coca-Cola was so stimulating, along with that other more sexy drug, cocaine. Okay, and cowpeas. So cowpeas, that whole big family of things that are black-eyed peas, crowder peas, my personal favorite, the purple whole pea, the lady peas, cream peas. Listen, I can talk to you for 2 hours about cowpeas. They are my jam, okay? So, and Josie gave me one that I have in my backyard. And that's not counting all the crops that Africans and African Americans who we became like took and made our own. So for those of you who used to watch American Idol, like if you did a cover of somebody's song, but you made it your original thing, they would say, you made that your own song, right? So we made some of these vegetables that came from other places, our vegetables, right? And so one of them, and this always shocks people when I say this, one of them is the collard green. It is not of African origin. It's probably from the Eastern Mediterranean. People look at me, Black people all around the world, when I say this, they're like, no, ma'am. They were like, stop lying, stop lying. You are wrong. And I'm like, I'm sad to tell you. I was like, but that speaks to the process of adaptation and adoption and resilience that wherever we traveled around the world, whatever process we got there by, many of them involuntary, like the transatlantic slave trade, that we made things work. And then we made them delicious, right? That is the thing. And we need to talk about this because we don't talk about it in our textbooks. And even now more than ever, when people can say that slavery wasn't all that bad, right? So we talk about the Columbian exchange, where we think that fruits and vegetables and animals moved from Europe to the New World. We don't talk about Africa. We talk about plants, and we do not talk about the people who brought the plants and the people who propagated them, whose knowledge made the plants. And so I say this to plant people, and some of you may be like really devoted folks who come to the botanical garden, and it's easier and more comfortable to talk about the plants, but we always have to talk about the people. And we have to talk about the fact that so many of our botanical gardens were rooted in empire and colonialism, and so they were very often large estates. This was part of a large land parcel. There were enslaved people somewhere in that parcel, maybe not on this particular land. And we need to talk about that because African ingenuity and knowledge powered our agriculture, continues to do so in the future and in the now.
Boy, you next time. You said everything I was going to say. I kept striking things out of my head. It was like, dang, I'm not going to say that. I want you all to do a thought. Those of you who have been this garden is conservation centered. Not Rossville. You was close. You was close off of Pool Road. Somebody's gonna say. Not Juniper. I said off of Pool Road. I'm gonna jump off of Juniper. Off of Pool Road, Ethan Raleigh. They have a English garden, right? But I want you all to really think how many gardens celebrating. Right? If any of you have seen anyone outside of this one, we're talking about today, raise your hand. Raise it real high to the sky. We have 2 out of maybe, 70 people in this room, small number. It is important because it gives you, as the others have said, the opening to have those conversations about the atrocities that African descendant people existed in and how throughout that they still had to grow, and not just grow and thrive and live, but actually subsist and take care of plants. It's hard for me to take care of plants when I'm going through my first world problems and being laid off, much less dealing with turmoil in life and racism that was more openly aggressive than it sometimes can be now. When we think of this type of project for me, being one of the board members on the Botanical Garden Foundation, is showcasing what can be done by others. Other foundations can give processions to recommend, to represent, and to showcase the excellent plants, the gardening styles of those who were African descended, Native Americans, and any other people who were intrinsically tied to the lands that either the gardens are built on or that the gardens and the communities inhabit. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to add, if you go to a garden that is, let's say 200 years old, I mean, some of you may have gone to Middleton Place, which is one of the plantations outside of Charleston on the Ashley River. It has one of the most exquisite English gardens in the world, right? Started in 1741. That is Black labor that is in the shape of those blades of grass and those bushes. Those camellias that it's famous for were propagated by enslaved people. They have been there and they've been cared for by an African-American gardener who has cared for each one of those bushes like his children for 70 years in the present, okay? And descendants of the people who were enslaved there have been pushing Middleton Place to have an African descendant garden. The best they could get were 3 raised beds on the side of the parking lot. They are still fighting for that. That's why we are doing this work. And one of those descendants told me about a family story of his that enslaved people, when there were visitors, because as early as the 1800s, people knew this garden was beautiful. People came from around the world to see it. In fact, there was a French botanist who was the person who coordinated this garden named Andre Michaud. When he came to the United States, he was not a slave owner. He bought enslaved people when he came and became a slave owner. And so one of the descendants told me that their family had, having a moment, right? They would bring visitors to the camellia bushes, and enslaved people would put their hands and cup them over the blossoms to capture the fragrance and put their hands over the noses of the visitors, the white visitors, so they could smell the fragrance. So think about a world in which somebody is cupping the fragrance for you so you can smell something beautiful, and that beauty is based on other people's servitude, which is very much the story of America, terror in the heart of freedom and beauty, right? And in spaces very much like this.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, yeah, that's history right there that she's speaking to. So I want to also segue into a little bit. I mean, you guys touched on this, but how important do seeds play in Black culture? This is something that we don't often talk about, even if from like the academy or like cultural standpoint. We talk a lot about, musical expression, clothing expression, but we're also talking about something that's really important, which is agrarianism, production of food. So how important do plants and seeds play into the Black experience when we're talking about agriculture?
That's a very good question. I'm going first this time. So I had to jump in here before Cynthia gives her typed up monologue, taking everything I'm going to say. When it comes to, I'm not bitter, but it's okay. when it comes to culture, right? During the pandemic, a lot of all of us, not just Black people, a lot of people were turned to plants. Those of you who had to keep working, who may have had time off, paid time off, you got to work from home, you potentially started getting into houseplants and going to that section of your big box stores that you've never been to before, looking up gardening centers, coming to places like this if they're open, or you grew a bunch of plants, you were going to farmers markets and everything else. During that spell, we got to live in a different time. Those of us who were able to not be working. I was still working, so I didn't have that luxury, but I still had plants in my house. So I was able to still connect and reach out to people. And as far as culturally speaking, especially for Black folk, I feel like a lot of us who are in my generation, millennials and younger, are not as connected to the land as our predecessors once were. There were a generation that left their mama or daddy's land and said, I am never doing this again. And they moved wherever they did, whether it was up north, another town, another city. They just said, I'm not working the land. And those who are older who did work the land, I hear the stories of, I smelled like crabs and seafood, because again, I come from the coast. We had to do all this work. I was dirty all the time. There was a lot of just labor that went into surviving post-slavery. So I think culturally speaking, us returning to plants gives us a thing that we deserve, a resilience that we deserve, an outlet that we can have outside of other things, right? For me, I don't know about all of you, but for me, I can go onto my patio and look at all of my plants and be like, I have peace, right? Hearing Josie's passing and starting the phone calls to let everyone know, I walked out onto my patio and sat down and had a little bit of a cry. But I was out there and I was able to see my plants. The cabbage collards I'll keep on mentioning, seeds that she gave me, I have them out there. Remembering times where I gave her plants off the patio, we were able to have that connection and that memoration in that space. And I was able to reconnect to my joyful memories to bring me peace and solace during that time. So I think culturally, people are returning to it and seeing it as more than just a geeky, offshoot, non-Black thing.
Pretty sure Dr. Greenlee is going to be able to explain this a lot better than I can, because she's a very articulate woman. It's amazing when you speak. So I would just come up and agree. But whenever I think about this, I think about during the Middle Passage, and people were being taken away from their homes, being brought over across this Atlantic Ocean in a place that they never knew before. And sometimes they had to just think about what can they do in order to I see the cracker they had, that they always ate in the morning for breakfast or for lunch. They had to hide it on them, either in the table, like somewhere on their person. And then whenever they came to this new world, this place they never heard before, they were able to grow it and able to have a piece of home with them. And so whenever I think about that, I think about a piece of resilience, you know, having the ability to preserve a part of who you are and making sure that it's not taken away from you. And then whenever you get more people who are into this work, who are into more agriculture or agrarian work, you're able to keep that culture alive. And then it's a beautiful thing to be able to say, this is a part of my history. And then you're able to continue and grow that and to continue to teach that to newer generations. And then you're just able to foster a bigger community. And so the seed is just a grain of potential for a lot of new opportunities for everybody.
I love the energy over here on this panel. I'm thinking about culture in a slightly different way. I'm thinking about the cultural practices that we have in our house every day. So recently, I was talking to somebody, a friend who grew up in Wisconsin and is an African American, but not from the South. And he heard a bunch of noise on the phone. He said, "Wait, where are you?" I said, "I'm on the front porch." And he said, "What are you doing on the porch?" I said, I have this peach that is so juicy. I can't eat it in the house. Uh, I had to go out on the front porch because it was dripping, and I had plums I eat over the sink. I had watermelon on the newspaper out on the porch, right? And then you had to fight with my daddy, who was like going to put pepper on the cantaloupe, everybody's cantaloupe. He didn't care that you didn't like it, right? And so thinking about those kind of cultural practices, those things sustained me, right? Even though I didn't understand it at the time. And actually, Josie gave me some green glazed collard seeds once. And I went on a story. I was actually writing a story about black moonshiners in South Carolina, like moonshiners, like now, okay? People still make moonshine, y'all. I mean, most of you all know this, but people act like they don't, but they do. And so I happened to be in the barn with this farmer and who used to hide he made moonshine. Now he doesn't have to. And I dropped my purse and the package of seeds fell out and he saw green glaze. Now he thought I was a city slicker, right? He was like, you have a PhD, you don't know nothing about none of this stuff out here. And then he saw I had his favorite collards. And then the interview was like smooth from there. And he was like, can I have some of your seeds? I said, you can have all of them. And he said, are you serious? I said, yes, I gave him seeds. And I said, actually, in my car, I have a whole bunch of other seeds in the glove compartment. And he was like, okay. And then he said, okay, now I'm gonna tell you about my sources I wasn't gonna tell you about. So I was like, seeds brought us together. They brought all of you here in some way. I mean, there are so many friends here. My friends, Josie friends, Derek friends, all of our mutual friends. We have Mamet, who is a seed farmer up here, who knows Josie. He drove 10 hours to be here because of the love of the plants in Josie. There's so many of you who are here. So, we're creating a renewed culture of agriculture and fellowship. And I'm just stoked. I'm just excited.
We do have a schedule here, so I did have 2 more questions planned, but I mean, it's so many people in the audience. I do want to open up this time, get a couple Q&A. So if anybody have any questions, okay, I'll just stand up. Give me the mic. Give me a second.
Please, what would Ms. Josie recommend we plant for our fall and winter gardens here in Durham now?
It's a great question.
What was that question again?
What would Miss Josie recommend that we plant our fall and winter gardens around Durham now?
So that is a great question. Josie was a big fan of plants that had an economic value. So when I say economic, I mean you get somebody's vegetables, right? Because Josie's family, y'all are here, right? So y'all know all the seeds and all the things that she had. So leafy greens would be one of the bigger things that she would say. She had Egyptian walking onions. If her family still has those, I would love some. Wink. She grew garlic because me and her had talked about garlic growing before the cold had snatched my garlic. But she and I will tell any of you for your fall gardens, you should go to your local cooperative extension office, right? Every county in the United States has one, and you can either go in person or online and find what things you should be growing in your area.
Now, you heard Derek reference cabbage collards, and that's hands down the thing I think about when I think about Josie, because I would talk to Josie about collard greens, and she'd be like, don't be talking to me about nothing that's not a cabbage collard. She was like, those other collards don't exist for me. She was like, you can get that other variety if you want to. So Eastern North Carolina folks will probably identify with the cabbage collard. I like other collards. I like Old Timey Blue, which is an Alabama collard, very associated with Black communities. Also, you have to have collards. We are in the center of collard diversity in the world, in the Carolinas. This is our thing. There's the Lottie collard, which comes from Eastern North Carolina. Some people believe it was named after an enslaved woman. We can't prove that. We can prove some other things about it, but not that. So it's going to always be greens, but think about the variety, because sometimes we think about collards and just think they're all the same, or you like that Southern collard, right? or a champions, but there are so many varieties. There are many varieties of collards as there are about, well, I won't make this direct comparison, but you think about apples and you think about Fuji's, you think about whatever your varieties are. We need to start thinking about our leafy greens in the same way, deeply, and forcing the places that we buy them from to think about what they actually are, because they're different. They're as different as the children in one family.
I believe there's a collard festival in Aden, North Carolina, I believe, that occurs every year. Or is it Snow Hills? One of them. Oh, they don't do it anymore? Oh, sorry. But yeah, this is a very collard state, so yes, in the right place.
My question is, are there medicinal plants that are common in the African American community, commonly grown in the African diaspora?
I know some stuff. You want to take us some first?
I think from my research, a little bit of what I've noticed is all the plants really have multi-uses. So one big one was the African oil palm. So in that one, it was used for like cooking, it was used for the oil, but also you could use it for like your skin, to heal your skin. It was also used for soap and to cleanse yourself. And that's actually the origin of palm olive. The soap brand palm olive is from the African palm. And so with that, it was also used for medicinal purposes. Now, an interesting thing about some of these plants is that whenever you go into some of the research, it's kind of hard to get into how they were being used across the board because it differs according to where you are. So like some people in one state will use it one way, some people in another state will use it another way. And so it's kind of hard to find a staple that goes all the way across. But for the most part, that is one of the main ones that I think about.
Phenomenal. To add on to that, so culturally, like the Gullah Geechee people would use like moringa, rabbit tobacco, black seed oil, different plants that were supposed to benefit people, whether it was to improve the immune system, open up your lungs or chest, or to just like get rid of a cold. So there were often uses of like hot peppers, onions and socks, like some of us remember parents wanting to do that. All types of plants that were indeed medicinal and used. But there are some plants, to go to what Erin's point is saying, where they may have been used medicinally within the African diaspora, but they are now known to be dangerous. Like one like comfrey I can think of, I feel like causes birth defects. Did I get that right?
Yeah, also sassafras.
And sassafras too, that's what she said, sassafras too. So we have to reverence the plants, but know that they may be medicinal, but not miraculous.
And even a plant that has some medicinal purposes may not be medicinal in the dosage you're taking. You have to think about how you take it. I'm thinking about, so my dad's family is from Appalachia, the mountains of North Carolina. There are very few Black people there, but that's us. And so people use black cohosh, which you can harvest in the wild, and they use, a lot of midwives use it, Black and white, across the racial spectrum, right? For childbirth. It's often used and has been, I mean, there's some evidence to suggest that it stops bleeding after childbirth, so it can stop postpartum bleeding and possibly save somebody's life. And people certainly use extracts of it around kind of the childbirth and birthing period.
Can you speak about the castor bean plant that is in the diaspora garden? I'm scared of it.
What makes you afraid of that plant?
Because I took photographs of it and then I went home and researched it and it was highly
Toxic because of ricin. So my mama, this is going to be a quick story. My mama and auntie would go to my great-grandmother's house, and whenever they were sick, she would either give them one of two things, sometimes in conjunction. They talk about it, like it was the most terrible thing in the world, and I never got it, but they got both of these things, castor oil and cod liver oil. Okay, I knew it. I knew there'd be a lot of faces. This is amazing, right? For those of you in the generation who's like, I never had that, they just used to apparently shovel it into their mouth. Now, when it comes to these plants, and these plants that do have a medicinal purpose, that medicinal purpose, that ritualistic use, while keeping in mind we're not medical professionals, is one that often could denature or remove the poisonous part of the plant, right? In addition to some plants that are poisonous, when you ingest them, you can still touch and feel them, right? That castor plant is not going to grab you like Audrey 2. I swear it won't. And I know we get fearful of this, right? Because it looks scary, it looks big. The colors were like, I'm not used to this, but castor is a beautiful plant you all could grow here. Me and Josie often talked about seeds of castor. I think I got some castor seeds from her somewhere. I got a lot of seeds from her hidden in my house. I'm gonna find them one day. But it is a beautiful plant that people do make oils which you can use for moisturization of your skin or your hair off of. I've not made these at home, but again, it's not something that if you touch it, it is deadly. There are plants that do exist like that, you touch them and it hurts you, but not that one.
Okay, so I was gonna also kind of line up with what you said. My mom would actually get castor oil, touch of sugar, with a touch of kerosene on it. Knock anything out.
What part of North Carolina are you from?
I don't know. That wasn't me. That was her.
Where are you
but,
from? Where are you from?
Oh, I'm from the Midwest originally, Evanston,
Okay, there
Illinois
we go.
specifically. But
I've heard about people doing kerosene here too. I don't know why black folk did it.
well,
There we go,
we came from Abbeville, South Carolina as well. So that
must have been it.
But
Some people believe that kerosene was a natural worm killer. So if you were infested, you had intestinal parasites, some people thought that that would flush them out. And who knows, maybe it did.
So my question is not necessarily dealing with any specific plant, but going back to one of the statements that you made about a generational shift. What I'm noticing, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this, and I'm going to try and put this best way I can, that train up a child in the way he should go and they will return back to it. Even though you see these generational moves away from that type of, I guess you could say, lifestyle of laboring and raising your own plants and everything, especially during the pandemic. You saw a lot of people returning back to that and finding themselves actually very, in the same way that you talked about it, very pleased and very relaxed and so forth. And a recent study even has shown that older people within their senior years are not happier because they forget, but that they are just not worried as much about the future as, say, younger generations are. So going back to the things that they found their own parents loving, they find themselves loving, and then therefore even laying that seed again in their, at this point, their grandchildren. So are we seeing maybe, instead of a degradation, maybe we're seeing a cross-generational jump where we're going to see younger people come back to that mindset of wanting to grow their own things?
That's a good commentary. I think that the pandemic gave the generations of myself and those, after me, something that we don't have the luxury of, which is time. So working a 40-hour week, you're maybe taking care of kids, maybe you're not. Traffic, especially in the triangle, is getting from place to place, trying to rob Peter to pay Paul. All of that takes time and effort away from doing these things, which are going into our gardens, which are working with these plants, which are doing even something as simple as keeping up house plants. Some people are like, I just don't have the time. Like, it's in your house. You have to walk in your house. But it's just time. They don't have that on their side. So I think that's the reason why.
I want to say I think it's both and, right? There's a certain segment of younger folk, and I now have embraced being middle-aged. I know I don't look it, but anyway. So there are young people who are making up the ranks of urban farmers increasingly, right? I think there's a age disconnect between the rural African-American farmer and younger folks. I think we're starting to think about farming as being an urban thing, and maybe we're forgetting a little bit about the farmers who have held it down in the country for a while. But there's a raging fashion for foraging, right? Which, on one hand, we've been foraging for a long time, okay? So foraging and hunting, especially if you come from rural folks like I do, right? So I have a PhD, but don't mistake, I'm country, okay? So, we have rabbit boxes in the backyard and going out looking for poke salad and doing that kind of stuff, talking about something that is sometimes toxic depending on preparation, right? So I think it's both. I think that there's growing recognition that came from the pandemic, but there's also just the boomerang move of Black people back to the South. Some of those great migration grandbabies whose parents went somewhere else and now are coming back and don't see the South as so scary anymore. You know, they grew up with family oral history that we had to flee the South, like the Von Trapps had to flee Nazi Austria, right? But for racial violence. So I think it's both and. I'm encouraged, certainly. I think there's room for all of us at the agricultural table.
Thank you, Charlotte. Something I was gonna ask about. I thought it was, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I promise I'll make it quick. I promise I'll make it quick.
You actually brought it, oh, you wanna say something first?
Yeah, like, let her do that, and then we'll come back. I can just talk about experience with being in a university right now, and being a university student, that like, there are a lot more people in my generation who are going more into like plant world and like going into house plants and getting into more like gardening and things like that. And I feel like it's because, like you said, the pandemic and like that time that gave us the way to like get more into it. But also I think going back to what I said earlier about like, I feel like there's more skepticism in my generation because we've seen how other generations have been treated and how we feel like there's not enough time to do the things that we want to do. And that we feel like there's so much that our like previous generations have been exploited for. And so now that we get a time to like do things for ourselves, we want to find a way to make things for ourselves. And so I'm seeing it more in my generation. I'm seeing it more in university students, undergrad and graduate. And so it's prevalent and it's starting to build up. So, yeah.
I was thinking about that also, just thinking a little bit more about that question. I've been thinking about social media and the narratives Black people tell about our agrarian past, right? Because there was a moment a couple years ago when people kept saying stuff that just really worked my last nerve. Like young people would be like, you know, our ancestors, they never dreamed of us. I was like, you don't actually know what your ancestors' dreams were, right? And so like, don't assume that their dreams were more limited than yours. And people were like, oh, you know, cotton, talking about picking cotton and denigrating older generations. And I was like, but that was an agrarian, more agricultural society. They did not have the opportunities that we have to go to college. My grandfather, I have a PhD, so does one of my sisters. My grandfather could not sign his name. He signed his name with an X. And so the change between those generations was immense. He made sure that all of his 13 children went to school, right? And so, you know, there's generational changes, but Black imagination is limitless.
We're gonna come to you. We're gonna come to you. Go ahead, Danielle.
Sorry, this on? Hi, I don't think I want to stand up, but I am really grateful. So my question was actually also going to be about this cultural trauma piece. So I'm grateful to be in room with other folks who think the same way. So just trying to rapidly come up with something else. I do a lot of work with those rural Black farmers who are elders. And one of the things that comes up a lot in that work is them talking about, yes, the work is hard. Yes, so many people left because they don't want to till the soils or there's not that much money in it. But something that I always find so inspiring is them finding their own meaning in the work. And for many of them, that has a spiritual component, whether that is them understanding it from a Christian framework or from an African traditional framework or something else. And so, and getting so inspired by just all the different ways in which they are thinking about our relationships with the earth and thinking about it as God's creation and thinking about it as not only a space of peace, but as a responsibility that we have. And so I would like to hear from each of you as you're dedicating your life to plants in different ways. Like, what does that mean to you on like a soul level? And how do you see that as addressing this sort of like larger cultural trauma that we were, you know, recently talking about?
I'm gonna say that like, as much as I acknowledge the traumatic history of Black people being forcibly tied to land, I know so many people who don't feel that trauma. Let me just say that like up front. but also I think about aging Black farmers, and I, like many people, lament that so many of them are disappearing, forced out of the business, losing their land, right? That is the dominant narrative, and there's a reason for that. But I also like to think of our elder farmers as as a living archive. And what would happen if, so I'm writing a piece about this right now, where I'm talking to Black farmers who are over 70 and asking them and thinking about them as an archive about climate change and asking them, what can't you grow now that you used to grow well where you are? What yield are you getting from your winter wheat? My family farm, we cannot grow the same winter wheat that we grew 30 years ago because there's been a 1-degree temperature change. That seems so small, but so significant. So what would happen if we actually looked at our aging Black farmers as the sentinels who are telling us about climate change and a store of information that we can use, right? Before they are no longer here.
When I think about it in the spiritual sense, I think about the reason, or actually a story about how I got into like this particular research. So I was in Louisiana visiting family, and I was talking to my aunt, and one day she was telling me about this couple that lives in like southern Louisiana, and she was learning from them all the different ways that they would like go out and go forward. She would say, they pick this plant before it blooms, and they would use it for this particular medicine, or they would do, they would go out during the middle of the night and like get something, or they would process it in a certain way. Right? And she was like, I'm learning all this from them. I'm able to learn more about this culture. And I asked, why is it that they were teaching you about this? And she said it was because, their kids didn't want to learn about it, right? And so it was something that kind of clicked with me, because me growing up, I had always wanted to connect with it on a spiritual level. Whenever I would go outside, I would pray outside because nature was my spiritual place. I would find God in these areas. And so the reason why I went into ethnobotany was because of my spiritual connection with nature. I am one of those people who don't have that trauma of nature, like the exploitation of my ancestors before me having. And that spiritual connection has propelled me in so many ways. And I think that's actually the reason why I gotten all those seeds that have led me to where I am now. And so I can personally say that that spiritual connection will always be there for me. And I am confident that there are other people who feel the same way.
We're gonna have the gentleman over here and the lady over here, and then we're gonna head out to the garden. So 2 more questions.
Beautiful. My quick answer is, I feel like this is just a thing I've meant to do when it comes to my place and my purpose on this earth, is to talk about plants and to get others to be interested in plants. And when it comes to that and showcasing and sharing my plant stories or just plant seeds, soil, whatever it is, I've been grateful to bridge that connection that people have between not believing they can grow plants and being able to have that success and what it can lead them to, right? These seeds, these plants, that you could do something just simple and just small for a person can literally shift the trajectory of their life. And if I can do that for a positive sense, then I will.
To your point about right now, young people are getting into earthing / grounding, and I got into it too as well. And the spiritual connection, once you get out there and start putting your feet on the ground, it's like the animals become different, everything becomes different. So to that point, but what I was going to ask about, Dr. Greenlee, you mentioned what I was thinking about. I'm very curious about the poke salad plant, and I thought it might not be proper for this forum because it is a wild plant. I'm just curious what you could tell me more about it. I don't know the official name, and is it a cultural thing? Is it specific to African American folk, or is it regional?
Okay, let's just be real. That's my cousin. Well, my play cousin, he's my cousin's brother, so he's my cousin. So poke salad, right? So if you go to my house right now, there's some poke growing right there because it just took up, it's what I call a freelance plant, which is a weed, right? But weed is relative, right? So what you think is a weed and it's a nuisance, somebody else wants that thing. I leave it in my yard because the deer love it. Okay, so the deer will go to it and they will leave my other stuff alone. And the deer pressure is high here. So poke salad does definitely have some regional resonance. A lot of people think about it with Appalachia, mountain people, or just people who are on the edge and need to supplement their diets because they don't have a lot, right? And so there is actually a poke salad festival, which is in Toccoa, Georgia, which is at the foot of the Appalachian mountain chain, which is a festival started by a Black family. Now, a lot of people think when they think Appalachian, they think Appalachian food, they think white people, right? Because it is the whitest region in America, only about 4% African American, right? Across the states that are in Appalachia. But Black folks do poke salad too, okay? May do it a little different. But it is a poverty food in many cases, but it's also a food that sometimes people just like, right? And so we can't assume something about their economic status, but it's also part of an expansive relationship to nature where you can look outside and you can see something and know that you can eat it.
What's the poisonous part?
The poisonous part is, okay, so I don't fix this myself. I have a couple of trusted people that I will eat theirs, but it's just like chitlins. You don't eat anybody's poke salad, right? Or potatoes. Okay, I'm gonna let the chocolate botanist have some things. He just whispered in my ear.
She was going to say it because I was hoping she would. So the poisonous part or the difficult part of it is called, I think, calcium oxalate. So calcium oxalates exist in the leaves of a lot of different plants. And what happens is if you were to eat these not cooked properly or not cooked at all, those would end up like hurting your chest, your throat and your vocal cords. And it can be very painful. There's a house plant that most of us may know by the name of dumb cane. Dumb cane, which is Dieffenbachia, right? That name is called that because that plant used to be a torture device, a punishment for enslaved people, because it would make you go dumb or mute because you wouldn't be able to talk. Hence the name dumb cane. So that is that difficult part. But when you are preparing poke salad properly, again, find somebody who has either done it in person or just you have to cook it a lot and drain a lot of water. Alexis, the Black Forager, has a beautiful video she shows on it.
Yeah, I mean, my folks soak it in the bathtub, but I love it as a plant because it's so beautiful. The pink, the branches of it are this hot pink and beautiful. I think it's a beautiful decorative plant. And like I said, the deer love it. And so I'm happy for them to eat it. But if you want to go down to Toccoa for the festival, okay, we can go.
There's one in the herb garden. Just as you go into the herb garden.
Okay, love to see it.
I did want to respond to somebody did bring up like the younger generation. A lot of our problem also stems from the lack of land access. Land is not cheap, especially here. It's expensive. So that comes from policy, which is we have vacant lots. So how can we revitalize these spaces for better uses? So it comes from lack of land access and also education. We are not really taught this in the system. Even if we go to college, we're not really taught this. Agriculture is more pushed towards a larger scale. So it's those two main reasons why young people are not involved, because we don't have access to land and we're not being taught this knowledge. We have one more question and then we're going out.
Hey, so mine is kind of half comment, half question. Just curious to hear what you all think. When you asked about the herbs and the medicinal herbs, so my focus with my little farm is medicinal herbs and dye plants. Your indigo, right? I just got some seeds coming from South Africa of indigo. And I guess one of the things that I find really interesting in like studying and working with these plants is like, it's a little like the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Does anybody remember that? The dad was always like, that's from Greece and that comes from Greek. So once you start, and I would love to hear your experiences with this, once you start looking at these plants that are just a big part of our culture more widely, and that are often credited, just kind of coming from different continents or different places, you realize like, oh, that's African. Oh, that's African. Oh, that's African. And it just becomes this like avalanche of history that you're like, how did that become something that we associate with like with Europe or with Japan or whatever the place might be. But so much of it has roots in Africa. So anyway, I would love to hear just things that you've come across like that, where maybe it surprised you that like it had roots in Africa, like in some kind of plant or ethnobotanical context.
I mean, I'm going to say I'm not surprised at anything having African origins because we all have African origins. So it doesn't really surprise me, even though I have been obsessed with sorghum lately. Like the amount of grains that and cereals that come from Africa and are like can survive arid weather and adverse climate conditions. Like fonio is my jam right now. Pearl millet, all of those things. Yeah, but I'm never surprised, right? Because I mean, it makes sense if you really think about it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think it was like a huge surprise to see that so many plants have like African origin. But I will note that one thing that did surprise me in my research is that there was a practice in some plantations that were called patches. So some enslaved people, when they would get done working out in the fields, they were able to have their own cultivated garden in their own homes. And so they were able to sustain their own nutrients that they weren't getting from the plantation owners. And so they were able to grow crops that were native to them, things that they owned and they liked that weren't available or that the plantation owners didn't themselves eat, right? So it was something that was interesting that I found in my research. But I think the one plant that I really was enjoying to understand more about was sassafras. Sassafras, it does have toxic components, right? But it was actually the origin of like root beer, believe it or not, right? So the root of it was being used for root beer. But also, there were some people on those plantations that would take the roasted sassafras and they would use it as a replacement for coffee. And so they would use it as a sassafras tea to get themselves up in the morning. And so I saw that in a couple of narratives in the Works Progress Administration. They had like narratives from the 1937, and they would like interview formerly enslaved people about what they would do on plantations. And so I've been reading through those, and that was something that I came across a couple of times.
I'm from Louisiana, so we use filet in our gumbo.
Yes, this is that one too. Yeah.
What hell Louisiana? Monroe.
Yes.
All these family connections, cousins.
I know.
Who they to be?
It's a family tree. I love to see that. And its intrinsic connection to the African diaspora, in my opinion, it is really about or figuring out that all these plants are of an African or non-Eurocentric mindset. It is literally about, for me, being like, why did I think, or why am I surprised by this? Why didn't I know this, right? A lot of house plants we know and enjoy come from South America, Africa, occasionally Australia, but they come from brown places, right? A lot of the fruits and vegetables we enjoy come from brown places or were cultivated here by the natives. But why don't we know that? Why is that something that is seemingly hidden, right? Why is this not as important as it could be? And for me, as a plant biologist, scientific communicator, all the gamut, I use my efforts, skills, and knowledge to tell people about these things and to be able to showcase to people that these plants don't come from where you may have just assumed they did. They didn't just pop up here. They were, for lack of a better term, trafficked around just as Black people were trafficked around. I have been quoted as saying, and y'all will hear it here, the only thing trafficked more than African American or African people and African descended people has been houseplants and seeds. We will take them and move them from country to country with no concern, right? And that was also done in African descended people. So I charge all of you to source where your plants come from, your local farmers, your seed providers, anything of that nature. I know, because I'm the last person here, I know we have some people who provide seeds here, who give out seeds, who sell seeds. If they could stand up real quick, I know we have a couple of people. Seed people. I know there's one in the back. Oh, I'm waiting. They're not in the back anymore?
And we also have, the Botanical Gardens also blessed us with the opportunity to have some seeds available for you all and some collard plants.
So seeds, you're going too far, you're doing too much. So with the seeds, these people who are seed vendors, who are providing seeds, who are community builders, find those people and connect with them. And lastly, I want to say a big thank you to the North Carolina Botanical Garden for putting this on, all the workers who have done all of this work, who have put this on. Can we give the North Carolina Botanical Garden a round of applause? I'm going to stay in and do a quick spiel. So I am on the board of directors for the foundation. They didn't ask me to do this. I'm doing this of my own gusto. If you are not a member, I think our digital membership is $5. Isn't that right? Did I make that up? Right? It's a little higher. It's a little higher? It's a little higher than that. Did I make that up? We have memberships of all pricing that you can join, right? Because those of you who may not be members, your funding goes to support things like this diaspora garden. And again, I challenged you at the beginning to think of what foundational gardens, botanical gardens, or growing spaces are doing this, that are doing the things, especially in this climate, thank you, especially in this climate, representing African cultures. They didn't necessarily have to do this, but they took a chance in the tumultuous environment. I'll say that. Y'all know what I mean, though. Y'all know what I mean when I say tumultuous environment. They took a chance to be able to do something that other people can get a little frustrated with. So thank you. I pass it back over to Abraham.
Well, thank you again very much, everyone, for the discussion. Thank you, panelists. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. We're gonna take this time now. Go see the garden. Go check it out. I'm gonna help lead the way. Erin also help me lead the way as well too, because I'm still new to this place. So let's go. Well, one second. Hold on a Can everybody give me 1 second? Miss Walker's mom would like to say something.
Before we leave, give us 1 second. I know y'all are ushering out. Stop issuing out. People, stop walking out. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Get them other people back in here. We have the Walker family. They want to get some words. They are right here. Let's give them your attention.
Josie Walker and family and friends sent a donation to this organization. And we appreciate all of you. We thank you for always asking kind to stand with them. And I have another one here. Hello. I just want to